So I think maybe we're ready to start just with a quick introduction. Yeah, hi everyone. Hi again for some of you. Hi for the people who just joined. This is Khadija Ramlawi. I'm the co-founder of Wasla Connect, and Wasla Connect is initiative that we're for a nonprofit, and we aim to help displaced Palestinians to access education and mentorship opportunities. We have three pillars, three programs. The first program is the mentorship program, which is a 4-month program where we match a mentor with a mentee for individualized experience, individualized mentorship, where we match you with a mentor for a whole 4 month. It's not a group mentoring, it's only like a personalized mentorship. And also we have live training sessions, such the one that we have, that it's open for anyone. And we also have the AUC program where we cover the fees for courses that is offered at AUC, either in Cairo or online. So if you're interested in joining Wasla, please, we will leave the links here in order to sign up for becoming a mentee. And Jonathan, if you please, I would just like point to something in Arabic, just really quick. It's about وصل registration. So أهلا وسهلا بالجميع. بس حابة أحكي إنه إحنا عندنا كمان مرات ثلاث برامج. الأول شغلة المنتورشيب، تاني شغلة هي اللايف تريننج سيشن زي اللي إحنا هلأ فيه، وكمان عندنا ال AUC كورسز اللي إحنا بنغطيها. فإذا أنتم مهتمين إن تكونوا من ضمن البرنامج وصلة كونكت، وإنه نشبككم مع منتور وتاخذوا فرص تعليمية معنا، بليز ساين اب إنكم تكونوا كمنتي. هلا هبة رح تحط اللينك في الشات، وإحنا هلا بدينا نحضر للكوهورت الجاي. إذا أنت بتنطبق عليكم المعايير الكرايتيريا، بليز سجلوا باللينك وبنستناكم إن شاء الله بندخل في البروسيس. So for now we have amazing mentor, supporter, community member at Wasla, which is who's Jonathan. Jonathan, we met. He's a current mentor in our program, and he wanted to even benefit more people and give open sessions for you guys, not only for his mentees. So today, Jonathan, I believe he's specialist in go-to-market, and he has extensive experience in sales, marketing, and so maybe over to you, Jonathan, if you wanna introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can kick off the session.
Of course, yeah, no, happy to be here. So yeah, my career is in sales and sales training and sales management. I've also spent the last 4 or 5 years actually running my own business. As you can imagine, both when I'm selling other people's products and when I'm building a business from the ground up, I've had to spend a lot of time thinking about messaging and positioning and how to describe what I'm selling and how to, talk about what I'm selling in a way that really resonates with people and excites people. And anytime I've ever had to job search, I've applied the same approach to, marketing myself, selling myself as a candidate. And this is top of mind for me right now because I actually just wrapped up a contract gig and I decided I wanted to go back into full-time work. So at the moment, I'm actually currently job hunting for a full-time role. And I'm applying all of these practices and techniques that we're talking about here. I've been working with my mentee on this stuff and it's been quite helpful for them. So yeah, I figured it'd be something that I could share with the whole group. Obviously, this is going to be kind of a crash course, meaning we're going to cover it really quickly. We're not going to be able to be very thorough on this. But my hope is that by introducing you to this way of thinking and way of approaching a job search, you'll be able to, maybe sit down on your own time when there's a little more time and sit through and think this out and write this out and come up with this approach on your own, right? There's only so much thoroughness we can do in a short session, but at least you'll be introduced to the approach during the session. And then it's my hope that over the coming weeks, you can continually refine, the talking points you use, the questions you ask, your approach. So in this session, so the first thing we'll do is kind of get clear on what really matters most to you, what type of roles you're the best fit for, Once you're clear on like what roles you're the best fit for and what the selling points for yourself are, then we'll talk about how to communicate that during a job interview to make it so that you're more likely to get a follow-up job interview and to get through the process. And then if there's time at the end, we'll even talk about a couple of techniques I've used on LinkedIn to use some of this messaging to actually get more interviews to begin with. So a lot to cover. It is my hope in this session that in addition to just hearing some interesting ideas from me, that you actually have time to at least jot down some notes for yourself and put together at least like a rough draft or a version 1 of this sort of messaging and talking points for yourself. So partway through the session, there'll actually be a worksheet that I'll share out, and you'll actually get a chance to fill in the worksheet as we go, as a way to, again, hopefully leave this session with something tangible you can work with, even if it isn't a finished product. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in here. There we go. All right, so first, let's just think through, right, the nature of a job search. So let's say a company has a job posted. And for this, discussion, let's say it's an 85K a year job. They have the job posted, and of course, lots of people apply. Now, of those people who apply, let's think through this. This is kind of a rhetorical question, but think it over. For the number 1 candidate, right, the candidate who they like more than anyone else, the candidate who actually gets the job, how much does that candidate start earning per year? Well, of course, they start earning 85K per year, since that's what the job posting is. Now, let's think through, what about the number 2 candidate, the person they really liked, went through all the interviews, was a close contender, but in the end didn't get the job? How much do they start earning per year? Well, of course, nothing this time around, right? And the reason I bring this up is to point out that a job search is a sort of winner takes all type situation. There is no benefit at all to being the number 2 pick who's close but doesn't quite get the job. All the benefit, all the money, all the reward goes to the number 1 pick. So it's kind of an all or nothing type situation. Now let's think through this from the lens of like a candidate's job search, okay? So let's say we got 3 different candidates here. And over the course of a month, these candidates apply to the same 6 jobs, right? And again, let's say these jobs are all paying 85K a year, just like the last one was. For this first candidate, when they apply, for the first company, they're actually the number 2 pick. Again, they really like them, just they don't quite get the job offer. For the next company, they're actually the number 20 pick. They weren't even close. For the next company, they're the number 14 pick. Again, not very close. They didn't even make it past their first interview. For the fourth company, candidate number 1, well, she's actually the one they picked, the one they offer the job to, and she gets the job at the 4th company. The 5th company, again, she was number 27. She wasn't even close. The 6th company, they actually really didn't like her at all. She didn't even get an interview. She was like the first person they disqualified. Okay, so there's our first candidate. She was last on a lot of people's lists, but first on one company's list. So the question is, how much does she start making per year at the end of the month? Well, of course, 85K, since again, that's what these jobs are posted for. Now let's think of the second candidate. The second candidate did not do very well. The second candidate didn't interview very well. They didn't advance very far. They were quickly disqualified. They really didn't get any traction. How much does the second candidate start earning by the end of this month? Well, of course, nothing. They haven't landed a job by the end of the month. But let's think through this third candidate. This third candidate was actually really good. This third candidate was actually everybody's number 2 or 3 pick, right? Nobody had anything bad to say about them. They progressed through the interviews. They got through to the last stage. But in the end, they were nobody's favorite. So they didn't get the job. How much does this person start earning? Of course, nothing. So the point here is that it is far better as a job seeker to be some people's favorite and some people's least favorite than it is to just be okay to everybody, right? Because if you're everyone's second pick, it doesn't matter. You still don't get the job. So the goal of a job search is not to, present yourself in such a way that nobody dislikes you, right? Present yourself in such a way that there's nothing wrong with you and you don't make any mistakes and everything's okay. You don't want to be just okay in a job search, right? In a job search, you want to present yourself so clearly, so strongly that some people are really drawn toward you strongly and some people are pushed away from you strongly, because you're going to get a job much faster that way than, again, trying to be, everyone's, someone that everybody likes. So how do you do that, right? How do you get to the point where you're some people's favorite and some people's, last on their list, rather than being everyone's second choice? The key to that, I found, is to clearly communicate in a way that the interviewer can really feel, right? Not just like logically understand, but truly feel, like in a more embodied sense, right? Feel in their body what you're like, what you're about, who you're for, who you're not for, and ultimately give them a crystal clear picture of exactly what you're a good fit for, what you're not, and what working with you would be like. And again, some will be attracted to that, some will be repelled by that. You're going to get a better outcome that way. An analogy that I like to use that's helpful here is think of a song that you've heard that, let's say it's a song that you actually dislike, you find it annoying and you never want to hear it again. But a lot of people find it really good and it's really popular. Or you could think of it the reverse way. What's a song that you actually really like and you love listening to, but a lot of people hate it and say it's annoying, they don't want to listen to it. Okay. That's the kind of song you want to be in a job search, where some people love you, some people really don't like you, and that's okay. Because the alternative is you're like elevator music, right? Or hold music. Let's say you're on the phone, right? And you get put on hold and they just play music in the background. Hold music is specifically selected so that nobody hates it, but also nobody really likes it, right? So in a job search, it's better to stand up, be who you are, and be that song that some people like, some people dislike, rather than trying to be elevator music that nobody dislikes, but also nobody really loves, right? So it's okay to be, your full, true, authentic self and have some people love that and some people hate that. That's a better outcome than being elevator music that everyone just feels okay on, right? Because again, no one gets the job if they just think you're okay. So what we're going to do the rest of this session is we're going to get clear on what is it that makes you great and unique? What are the types of opportunities you're the very best fit for? What are the types of opportunities you're actually not a great fit for? So that you can be crystal clear with your messaging and your talk tracks and the way you describe yourself and the way you conduct yourself during interviews during your job search. So that's what the rest of the session is focused on. It's getting clear on who you are, what makes you great, and then getting clear on how to communicate that well, so that some companies will say, heck yes, that's our person. And other companies will say, oh, no, that's not it. And again, that's a far better outcome than everybody just thinking you're okay. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. So this is where there's going to be an element of a worksheet here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat. So if you're here in the live session, of course, go ahead and open this link right now. If you're in the recording, right, go back to whatever sort of, wherever you found the link to this recording, and you'll also find the link to this worksheet. So
yeah, we'll be dropping, sorry for cutting you, will be dropping the links that you're using in the video description of the YouTube channel.
Perfect. There we go. So you can find the link there to this worksheet. Go ahead and open it up. It's the same worksheet you see in front of you, and you'll be able to make your own copy of it. Now, again, during this, for those of you attending the live session, this is going to be something that you won't really have time to fill out thoroughly during the session, but at least put a few light notes here, and then you can go back later today or tomorrow, and you can actually fill it out a bit more thoroughly. But the first thing you're going to get clear on is you're going to think through, okay, what is it that makes me a great fit? What is it that I offer? What are the attributes of myself which, allow me to do great work? And sometimes it's helpful to think through things that are like universally good about you, but other times it's helpful to think through things that are just the way you are, and it's not necessarily good or bad, it's just the way you work. Right. So for example, if I was filling this sheet out, characteristics of myself, I would put down things like, when I think through things and when I do work, I tend to do a very slow and thorough job with things, rather than doing like, a really quick job that maybe is only just okay. It's not great quality work, right? So that's not necessarily good or bad, right? In some jobs, the ability to do really slow, thorough work is exactly what's needed. In other jobs, that would actually be terrible because you need to do very quick, surface level work, and that's fine for that job. So think through characteristics of yourself, the way you tend to operate, the things that you're good at. So maybe you're really good at, helping people resolve conflict, right? And, smoothing over difficult situations. That could go on this list. Maybe you have a very direct communication style, right? Where you don't necessarily, spare people's feelings. You just say exactly what you're thinking and get to the point. Again, that's not necessarily good or bad. In some companies, they wouldn't like that, and that'd be a bad fit. In other companies, they'd love that, and it'd be perfect. So it's not good or bad. It's just the way you are. So think through attributes of yourself. So skills that you have, right? Of course. So maybe you're really good at multitasking, right? And that's good. And that's a skill that you bring. Maybe you have experiences, working across a variety of cultures and countries, and that is good for the role you're supporting. You can put that down. But just think through elements of yourself that, again, are a clear description of how you work and what you bring to the table. Might be good things, might be things that are neither good nor bad. It just depends on the situation. But fill this out. So again, if you're on the session now, I'll pause for like 30 seconds here to give you a chance to think. Try to put down at least like 3 attributes of yourself, how you work, how you operate, and what you ultimately bring in a professional setting. Okay, next thing would be to think through what are the characteristics of the best opportunities for you, right? In some cases, these might be kind of related to the list above. Other times they might be totally different. But think through the type of jobs that are the best for you. So think through in terms of what are the types of companies you do best at, right? Large versus small companies, um, you know, remote versus in-person working. What are you the best fit for? But even think of terms of like the nature of the work, right? Do you work on your own solo, or are you a collaborator in this role? Um, that's one way to think of this. But even think about like the cultures of the companies that you work at, right? Or that you would work best at. The leadership style that you respond best to, right? The culture across the team that you operate best in and that you can best contribute to. So think about this from a variety of different lenses, right? In terms of what are the best opportunities for me? What makes the best jobs, the best companies? Again, some of this you might be inspired by the list up here. Some of it might be totally unrelated. But just think about attributes and characteristics of the opportunities and the jobs that you think would be a best fit for you. Again, I'll pause here for 30 seconds. So if you're in the live session, you can jot a few notes down. Of course, if you're watching the recording, feel free to just pause it and fill this in. If you're watching the recording, it's probably best to take some time and fill this in thoroughly. If you're in the live session, you can just jot down maybe 3 things just to get started. All right. So now you have some thoughts written down about what the best opportunities are for you, the type that you are the best fit for. Because again, the idea behind this is if you can get clear on what types of companies and opportunities you're the best fit for, you can make sure to communicate in such a way that those opportunities and those companies will see you as the best fit for them. And if you're not clear on this, then it's impossible to message that way, right? So this is similar, by the way, if you were like running a company or selling a product, right? This is like similar to the process a company goes through in defining who their product is for. Obviously, anybody can buy their product, but companies always design their product for a specific type of person that is like the best fit customer for their product. So this is the idea here. You're identifying who is the very best fit for you, the best companies, the best teams, the best managers, the best types of roles. And that way, again, you can have an opportunity to really focus how you communicate in a way to make sure that you're going to resonate with and excite those people and stand out as their number one pick. All right, so at this point, you should have a bunch of ideas written down, but of course, a giant cloud of ideas isn't very workable. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to really hone in the most important ones, right? The top 3 criteria. And I like to think of this in terms of what I call outside in factors, meaning these are things that you wouldn't know about a company, or I'm sorry, that you can learn about a company just from researching them on the internet. So you can learn things like, is it a small or a large company, right? Just by looking at the company from the outside. you probably can tell if it's a remote role or if it is a, in-person role from the outside. You can probably tell, I don't know, if they've raised funding or if it's like a privately owned company. You can tell, what industry they're in, what customers they serve, right? You might be able to learn some stuff from the job description. So think through in terms of things that you can tell from the outside. And that's one category. And you want to pick like the top 3 most important criteria that matter most to you that you could learn from the outside. And again, those will probably be things taken off of this list, although again, you might think of a few others. Once you have that locked in, the next piece is to think through the inside view factors. And there's a few other things to consider there. So I'll give you, again, like 30 seconds here, just to jot down some notes about what are the things that you could learn about a company from the outside, just from looking them up online, that would help you tell, is this like a really good fit company for me? Or is this, maybe more of a marginal fit or a just an okay fit that isn't great? All right, so next we're going to talk about these inside view factors. So these are things that you wouldn't know until either you started working there or until you talked to someone who worked there, right? So these things you can't learn about a company online necessarily. You actually have to talk to someone who works there to learn these things about a company. And again, the idea here is you want to dial in the top 3 most important things that make an opportunity a great fit, that mean that you would love working there. That means that they would love having you on their team. That means you'd be able to make a great contribution and really do your best work. So, if you look at this list here, right, things like, can I do slow, thorough work? Or does it require more fast, lower quality work? You might not know that until you talk to somebody. Whether or not direct communication is appreciated or whether or not that would be seen as abrasive, you probably won't know that until you work for the company or you talk to someone who works there, right? The style of the leadership team, right? You probably won't know that until you work there. The culture of the company, you probably won't know that. Even the extent to which like you would like really work solo on your own versus collaborate with a team. Maybe you can learn that in the job description, but you might need to talk to someone within the company about the culture and how they tend to communicate and operate. So those are the types of factors that I mean by inside view factors, right? Things you wouldn't know until you talk to someone who worked there. Now, when choosing your top 3 inside view factors, there's a handful of things to consider because really, I think most of your job search and how well you resonate with the people that you're working with and the interviewers rather, has to do with these inside view factors. So of everything on this sheet, this box here is definitely the most important box to get right. It's also the one that I imagine you'll probably refine multiple times, right? Doesn't matter how good a job you do at first. After a couple of interviews, you'll probably make some changes to this here. So this is really where to focus your attention here. These factors here, what's nice about them is you can, do a little bit of initial filtering up front, meaning if there's, 20 job descriptions posted online, you can look through, learn about these companies, and maybe figure out of the 20, which are the like 5, which are the best fit. And then you can focus your attention on those 5. So this side of the list is useful for sure. But this side of the list here, the inside view factors, this is what really is going to help you ace these interviews and leave the interviewers feeling like this is our person, this is who we want. So again, this is the part to focus your attention on. And when thinking about these inside view factors, there's 3 things which would make you pick an item for your list to be one of your top 3 that matters most. So the one that's probably the most important is you want to pick something which is a mutual green flag, right? So green flag simply meaning it's a good sign. It's something that makes the interviewer think, oh yeah, this is our person. I like this. And of course, it's something that makes you think about the job opportunity. Oh yeah, I think this is the right job for me. I think I'd be happy working here. So a green flag just means a good sign, right? And you want it to be a mutual green flag. So what that means is after you and the interviewer have discussed this particular topic, and you've realized that, yes, in fact, there's some alignment here, both you feel good about the job and the interviewer feels good about you. And I'll give some examples of that in a minute to make sure that it's clear. The other attribute is this is something that actually has to truly be important to you. So important to you that if you brought it up as something that mattered to you, and this company like was the total opposite, and that made the interviewer think, ooh, maybe this person isn't a good fit, that would be okay with you. You wouldn't necessarily be all happy that you lost a job opportunity, but at least be okay with you. And the third thing is what makes it really good is if it's something that you actually have some stories that you can tell about your past, about your career, about your experiences that really prove to the interviewer that this is something that matters to you or it's something that you can do and that you can really back it up with these stories rather than just saying, hey, this matters to me and then have nothing else to add to that. So let's go through some examples because I imagine that isn't totally clear. So when I was working with my mentee, one of the things that he had on his list of an inside view factor is that he wanted to work on a team that was very organized and structured with the way they went about work, particularly one that used like a specific methodology like Agile or Scrum or something like that, rather than, no methodology, just a manager barking out orders and assigning tasks at random. He found that that made a really big difference on how effective he was at working. And again, you can't always tell that from the outside of a company. So that's more of an inside view factor that you'd have to ask them within the company. How structured and organized are you in the work that you do? And do you use a particular, methodology to get it done? So this was a good one to choose as one of his top 3 for a few reasons. One was that it was a mutual green flag. So here's what I mean. If he approaches a company and he says, hey, what kind of methodology you guys use? Do you use Agile or something similar? The reason I asked is that I've worked at some places that did, some places that didn't, and I found I did a great job with methodologies. I loved adhering to them. It made it easy for me to do my work, and I really thrived in those environments. And then the interviewer says, yes, actually, we're a big Agile shop. We've just, converted the team to Agile last year, and it's been going great. Once that conversation is concluded, it is a green flag for my mentee because now he knows, okay, good, they have a methodology, it's structured and organized. That's what I like. But it's also a green flag for the interviewer because if they use this methodology, they're going to want to hire someone who follows it, who works well with it, who values it. And now because my mentee brought up that topic, now the interviewer knows this person is going to fit in well with our team. They prefer to work the same way we prefer to work. So this is a mutual green flag. It's a good sign for both parties that there's a fit here. This is also something that he was, if necessary, willing to lose over. So what that means, if he's in an interview and he asks about, hey, do you guys follow methodology? I work better with methodologies. And the interviewer says, oh, not even close. It's a madhouse in there. It's just the leader barking orders and telling you what to do, and there's no process to it. Well, if that's where the conversation goes, that interviewer is probably going to leave thinking, this probably isn't our guy. And that's okay with my mentee because he really doesn't want to work there anyways, right? Because he would not do well in that environment. He would not succeed. He probably wouldn't last long term, and then he'd be back on the job market in 6 months because it wasn't a good fit. So it's actually important enough to him he's willing to lose over it versus some factors, which again, might not actually be that important. And the other thing that's good is he did have stories to support this, right? He could talk about one company he worked at that had that, one company that didn't, the differences in his experience, the differences in the quality of his work. So he had some stories to back it up. So it made for a really good factor. So for him, that was one of his top 3 items. Whereas this one, he wanted an opportunity that was remote work. Now let's think through this. If he brings up, hey, by the way, is this remote or in person? And the interviewer says, oh, it's remote. That is a green flag for him because now he's more interested in this opportunity because it's remote. But it's probably really not a green flag for the interviewer. Like the fact that he likes remote work and they do remote work doesn't necessarily make the interviewer think this is our guy, right? It's not something that would necessarily make it more likely for him to get the job because he likes remote work and so do they. So it wasn't really a great item to be in this top 3 criteria that he really focuses his attention on. So of course he's going to ask the question during his interview process, but it's not going to be something he really focuses on. Another one that mattered to him is he wanted to be an environment of like a culture of open collaboration between peers. So rather than each person being heads down on their own work and not talking to each other, he wanted to work in a culture where it was very common for people to bring challenges to each other, to help brainstorm ideas, to share wins with each other, to share losses and lessons learned with each other, and to do a lot of collaborating. Now that ended up being one that he picked as one of his top 3, because again, that's a mutual green flag. If he talks to the interviewer about the value of collaboration and how that's what matters to him, and that's what he works best, and that's what one of his skill sets is. And if he finds out from the interviewer that, yep, that's what the team values too, and that's the way we operate, That's a green flag for him that, yep, this is a good job for me, but it also serves as a green flag for the interviewer that, yeah, this guy would fit well with our team. I think he'd jive well with our team. It's also something that matters a lot to him, where again, if he talks about collaboration and the interviewer says, oh, hell no, you're going to be off and, siloed off in your own little cubicle and no one's ever going to talk to you. He's okay with the fact that having asked that question might make it less likely he gets the job. Because again, he doesn't want to be everyone's second choice. He wants to be some company's first choice and some company's last choice. And that's totally okay. So he's willing to lose over this collaboration piece. And again, he had a few stories to back it up. So it made sense to make this one of his top 3 criteria. One last example for him was that he wanted in a situation that really allowed for deep work and a lot of focus with few distractions. And that one actually didn't make his top 3. For some people it would have, but for him it didn't. And it's because we weren't sure if that would really be a green flag for the interviewer, right? If he says, hey, I like to work without distractions, and the interviewer says, oh yeah, that's fine. We can support that. You'll be fine. That's good for him. Now he likes it, but it doesn't necessarily make the interviewer all that excited to say, heck yes, this is our guy. He likes to work without distractions. We weren't sure. Maybe some interviewers would, but it didn't feel really strong to us. Also, he wasn't really sure if it was something he was willing to lose over. While he prefers distraction-free environments, he can work in more distraction-full environments and still be okay. So he wasn't sure if he was really willing to lose over that. And he didn't really have any stories to back that up. It's just something he, prefers. But again, it's not like a strong preference. He doesn't have any stories to back it up. So for some people, that one would have been a top 3 criteria, but for him, it really wasn't. So again, pause the recording. If you're in the live session, take a moment to make some notes of these inside view factors, things you wouldn't know without talking to a company. What are the ones that are the most important to you? And most importantly, what are the ones that you think would be a mutual green flag, meaning it would make the interviewer feel good about you in the same way it would make you feel good about the company, if you guys talked about this topic and found there was alignment there. So again, this is like the most important part. I don't expect whatever you write down now to be your final version. It'll probably evolve over time, but just jot down a few notes of what you think might be the most important inside view factors, because we will be using that going forward through the sessions. You'll need to have at least something written down to work with, even if it isn't your final version. All right, so now the question is, okay, what do we do with this clarity? Now you have a good idea that, okay, these are the types of jobs that I want to focus on, and this is the types of companies, cultures, environments, teams that I would actually be a great fit for. The goal here is to make sure that as you go through the interview process, you and the interviewer both get a clear picture of whether or not you align on those inside view factors. Because again, if you align, you're going to feel good about the job. But also, if you've chosen your 3 factors right, if you find alignment in those 3 factors, that's also going to make the interviewer say, heck yes, this is our person. I see a lot of alignment here. And again, if it's the wrong fit, if it's the wrong company, they're going to say, I don't think so. And again, remember, it's better to be somebody's favorite and everyone else's least favorite than it is to be everybody's second or third choice, right? There's no payout for being everyone's second or third choice in a job search. You've got to be somebody's favorite, and you only have to be one company's favorite, right? You don't have to be, your pay isn't based on the average of what 10 companies thought of you, right? Your pay is based on what one particular company thought of you and if that company gave you the job or not. So in terms of what to do with this information, I already mentioned that these outside factors, they're really good for like sorting your list. So if you have 20 jobs that you're going to be applying for, you can look at these factors and decide, you know what, these 5 jobs are like the most important. So these are the ones I'm going to put a little more effort into. I'm going to customize my resume for them. I'm going to send an email to the hiring manager. I'm going to research the company in advance. The other 15 companies that aren't as good a fit, I'll just toss a resume out and hope for the best with them. But the inside view factors, they can really change how you approach your interviews and also can actually, in some cases, help you land more interviews. But we'll start with how to approach your interviews based on these inside view factors. So the idea, as I mentioned, is you want to make sure that by the time the interview is over, the interviewer is clear on where you stand on these 3 areas. And you're clear where the company stands on these 3 areas. You're clear whether or not there's a match there. So you want to make sure those 3 topics come up in conversation. And of course, there's a very good chance that if you just let the interviewer, completely ask all the questions all the time, these topics might not even come up. which of course would be a really bad thing since these topics are what helps the interviewer feel like, yes, this is our person. Yes, there's an alignment here. So you want to do a little bit of taking control of these conversations, as well as, of course, being ready if those topics come up on their own. So there's three things that you're going to come up with to help yourself. One is you're going to come up with a bit of like answers to some common questions. Two is you're going to come up with some stories that you can tell. And three is you can come up with some questions that you can ask. So let's tell me about yourself overview. Really, there's a few different versions of this question. I'll add a few here. So there's tell me about yourself. That's a common one they ask. Another one that you might hear is tell me about your background. Another one might even be, what are you looking for in a role? But just think of some of those common questions you might get asked and just map out in advance some rough ideas. It doesn't have to be a word for word script, but some rough ideas of how you'd answer each of those questions in a way that made sure these topics came up in conversation. Right. So example, what are you looking for in a role? Let's say it was my mentee, right? He would want to make sure that this culture of open collaboration came up in his answer. And he'd want to make sure that the structured, organized using methodology came up in his answer. So, he'd just come up with an answer for, okay, what are you looking for in a role? And it would be, okay, well, I'm looking for, software company, but one of the things that matter to me is, the culture at the team. I tend to thrive well in cultures with collaboration and with a lot of organization. You don't even have to go into detail. You just have to say a little something to be a bit of a conversation starter. Or maybe tell me about yourself, right? Tell me about yourself. Well, I'm a, quality assurance, analyst by trade, and I have a lot of experience working at these companies. And, I tend to thrive in these environments. And I'm a really collaborative person, a team player, and I tend to be very structured in my work. Right? You don't have to overthink this. Just make sure that you have a few prepared answers to some common questions that would include some of these main talking points that matter most. So that's a good way to make sure at the very start of the interview, you get these things in front of the interviewer, and maybe, there's an opportunity then to do a deeper dive on these topics. But you at least want to make sure you toss them out there at a high level in these answers. Not even going to bother, having you stop here to write this in. You can fill this out later. The stories is an important one. Of course, anyone who's gone through an interview knows a lot of times they ask you about, tell me about your experience with handling X, and you tell me about a time when you dealt with Y situation. So you want to be prepared with stories, and you want to be prepared with stories that help highlight those top three factors of what matters most for you, right? So if you're my mentee, you want to have a story prepared to talk about organized, structured work following the agile methodology. That way, if they ask you any sort of question related to how you tend to work, you have that story prepared, ready to go. You can tell that story in a way that conveys, this is important to me. This is how I prefer to operate. And again, it doesn't have to be in too much detail, right? You could simply say, okay, the situation is I joined a company and they were doing a major overhaul of a ton of their software on a tight deadline. So that the task at hand, the challenge for us was we had to, get through a huge amount of quality assurance in a short amount of time. But due to the nature of the work, we had to do a really thorough job and we couldn't miss anything. So the approach that we took is we implemented the agile methodology, and the result of us using agile is that we actually not only hit our target, but we finished 3 days early. The big takeaway from that for me was simply that I tend to work better with a structured methodology rather than a bit of an unorganized approach. So this particular framework, right, situation, task, approach, result, takeaway, right, START is the acronym for this. You don't have to use this framework for your story. If your story doesn't fit in that framework, it's fine. As long as you have a pretty short, concise story to use, go for it. But I think you'll find that more often than not, most of your stories probably can fit in this START format. And this tends to be a really good format for interviews. In fact, some companies even specifically ask, like when you're doing preparation for the interview, they'll tell you in advance they prefer this framework. So use this framework when you can. But the idea here is we got 3 boxes for 3 stories. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through each of your 3 top most important inside view factors. And you're going to come up with a short story for each one that you can tell to convey that about yourself. So again, here was an example of my mentee, right? This using a methodology was important to him. So I gave that example, but we could easily come up with a story for, a culture of open collaboration between peers. So you want to have these stories ready. You want to practice and rehearse these stories in advance so that if there's ever an opening in the conversation to use the story, you can use the story. Because remember, going through the story in that format I just said, that will be a really good sign to the interviewer. If they're a fit, if that's the way they operate too, it's going to be a really clear sign to them that, yes, this is our person. Or if that's not how they operate, it'll be a clear sign that, maybe this isn't a fit. Which again, that sounds terrifying as a job seeker, but you definitely are going to get a better result in your job search if you're somebody's first pick and somebody's last pick, again, rather than being everybody's second choice. So I'll pause now for anyone attending the live session, take like 30 seconds, jot down some notes of what these stories could be. In 30 seconds, you won't be able to go through the whole format here, the whole framework here, but maybe you can just leave a note for yourself of like what experience that you're going to use as your story. And then afterwards, you can go through and put it in this particular format. Or again, if this format doesn't fit, you can ignore the format and write your own story. But just make a note of, for the 3 things that matter most for you that you wrote here, jot down an experience you could talk about as a story that would convey that message clearly to the interviewer. All right, hopefully you have at least 3 experiences jotted down. And again, in the future, you can go back and fill it out in the format and clean up the way you talk about it and the wording you use. But for now, you got your stories locked in. So you can start the interview off with an overview of, hey, this is who I am and this is what matters to me. And that'll at least start the conversation down the right path. It wouldn't surprise me if in response to your opening answer to the tell me about yourself question, the interviewer immediately asks about, tell me more about this, in my mentee's case, structured, organized, using methodology thing. And you might get an opening to use your story, right away. In some cases, that won't happen though, right? In some cases, the interviewer will take the conversation down different paths and ask you other questions. And what might happen to you is you might get to the point where you realize you're over halfway through the interview and you haven't had an opening yet to tell one of these stories. You haven't had an opening yet to really talk about these top 3 factors that matter most to you that would make you a great fit for the company. And that obviously isn't a good thing. So in that case, you can use simple questions to direct the conversation towards those topics so that you get an opportunity to tell your stories, talk through what matters, ask the interviewer some questions, and ultimately make sure that the conversation centers on those points. So the last thing you're going to do in this particular section is just come up with simple questions that you could ask to send the conversation down that path if, in fact, the opportunity didn't arise naturally to talk about those things. So again, for my mentee, let's say we're 20 minutes into a 30-minute interview and the topic of how organized and structured they are and using like the agile methodology. Let's say that topic hasn't come up, but that's one of the big things that matters to him that he thinks is A, what makes a company a fit for him, and B is what makes him a fit for a company. So he wants to make sure that comes up in conversation. He could ask a simple question here about what methodology do you guys use? Right? You don't have to overthink this. This doesn't have to be a complicated question, but just map it out. What's a question you could ask? Or even maybe a different way, maybe don't use methodology. How do your teams stay organized and on task in a, fast changing environment, right? That could be another question he asks. But what's nice about this question is twofold. First off, the moment you ask the question, before you even tell your story, that actually signals to the interviewer that that's something you think about and that's something you care about, which again, if they're a company who also cares about organization and the agile methodology, the fact that you ask that question is going to be a great signal already. But then if you then get an opportunity to tell your story, right, your little start story here, that's an even stronger sign to the interviewer that, oh yes, this person's a good fit for us. So just come up with some questions in advance so that if you don't, if the interviewer doesn't ask you about it, you have the opportunity to ask them that question to make sure the conversation goes down that path. So again, look through your top 3 criteria, the things that matter most to you, particularly these inside view factors. And for each one, come up with 1, maybe 2 questions that you could ask during an interview if you found that you weren't getting an opening to discuss that topic naturally. Yeah, I'll take 30 seconds here. For those of you in the session to write this down, if you're watching the recording, just pause it, take as much time as you need to think of these questions. But again, you don't have to overthink them. These can be pretty straightforward questions. You just have to be prepared with them in advance so you don't have to come up with them on the spot, because that can be more challenging during the pressure of an interview. All right, so that's what you're going to do during the interview, right? So again, you got three options. You start the interview off with an opening statement about yourself that incorporates some of these three things that you think make you a great fit for companies and which make companies a great fit for you. You're then prepared to use these specific stories to convey that point. If an opening presents itself, if the interviewer asks a question related to that, you can plug the story in. And then you're also armed with a handful of questions you can use if the interview isn't asking, if these topics don't come up on their own, you can ask these questions to steer the conversation towards those topics. So if you have these three things prepared, you should be ready in an interview to clearly communicate what it is that makes you a great fit for a company, what makes a company a great fit for you. And ultimately, if you do this, what you'll find is that some companies you interview with are going to say, heck yes, this is our person. And some companies will say, yeah, I don't think so. And that is totally okay with you. That is far better than everyone saying, they're just okay, right? Because again, no one gets a job if they're just okay. They get a job if there's like a perfect fit. And there's no way a company can see a perfect fit if you aren't clear with them on these things that matter most to you. So this will help make sure that those come across very clearly and that they can decide fit or no fit based on it. And again, this is something that you're going to refine over time. Whatever you pick first, I doubt is going to be what you stay with long term, right? Every couple of interviews, you might switch and change out what these factors are that matter most. Maybe because you realize something matters to you, or maybe because you realize something matters to interviewers that maybe is more compelling than what you picked. You can change these out regularly. The idea is to come prepared to an interview, ready to showcase these parts of yourself in a way that is clear. All right, last thing we'll touch on here real quick is now that you have this clarity on what type of roles you're a great fit for and which ones you aren't, you can actually use this clarity to actually land more interviews up front. There's two particular approaches that I've used for this. Each one has worked for me in my current job search and has landed me interviews. So I definitely stand by these. So the first approach is something that you can do when you know who the hiring manager is, whether because it's just clear from their title or maybe the job description literally lists out who the hiring manager is. But if you know who the hiring manager is, here's something that you can do to help land an interview. First thing is you send a connection request. And the connection request, the note that I've been using has been this one here. I just read the job description for the blank role you've posted, and I have a question. They don't all accept, but most people accept that request. And a lot of them will immediately respond with, hey, what's your question? In this particular example, the person didn't respond with what's your question. So I sent this little bump to get permission to share. And I said, hey, good to be connected. Do you mind if I ask a question? And she said, yep, go ahead. What's the question? And then I asked my question. Now, this question was one of my best fit questions from my top 3 criteria here. So for myself, the things that mattered most about a company, things I really wanted to learn about a company, I picked one of those, which was like the most important one for me, my number one question, and I just asked it here. Now, I'll note I used a voice note for this. It's been about a week and she hasn't responded yet. So I'm thinking maybe the voice note was a bad idea. Maybe I should have typed it. So I'll probably respond to this probably later today and just type the question out and say, hey, I realize some people don't like voice notes, so here's the typed version. But this is the approach, right? Start with, I have a question about, I just read this job description. I have a question. Once they accept, hey, can I ask you my question? Then they say, sure, ask the question, and then you drop it in there. And then when they respond back with some positive reply, like, yeah, actually, that is the way we like to operate too, or yeah, I think that might be a good fit. That's when you ask for a meeting and you say, oh, great, so glad there's a good fit here. Sounds like maybe it's worth us exploring, want to touch base Tuesday afternoon to talk over it more. And essentially, you've just kind of gotten your way into an interview rather than having to rely on them seeing your resume and being impressed by your resume. This question that you asked, remember, this is a mutual fit question. So the fact that you're asking the question tells the interviewer, I think this person's a good fit. And then they respond back with, yeah, that sounds like a good fit for us. That kind of opens the door for you to suggest, hey, let's have a meeting to talk more. So I've done this, obviously this one hasn't quite finished yet, but I've done this twice so far with hiring managers and gotten meetings booked off of asking the question, them responding positively with, yeah, that's how we operate too. And then I say, okay, great, let's talk then. So this can work sometimes. The only downside to this is that each job only has one hiring manager, and about half of them won't accept your connection request to begin with. And of those who accept, about half of them won't respond. So you don't have tons of opportunities. So the other thing that I'll do is I'll actually reach out to people who would be peers of mine if I joined the team, or just like individual contributors on the team. What's nice about reaching out to peers or individual contributors at a company is that there's just more of them, right? You can send 10 connection requests out to 10 people in the department that you'd be working on. The other thing is usually they tend to be more willing to accept connection requests and more willing to answer questions in their DMs, just for the simple fact that people who are individual contributors get less DMs sent to them, right? If you're a hiring manager like this person was, she probably has 6 salespeople messaging her every day and 2 job applicants messaging her every day. So she doesn't respond to all of them. But if it's just an individual contributor on the team, they might, rarely get messages sent to them. So they're more likely to respond. So this is what it looks like. I send a connection request. The note that I've been using is, hey, I'm thinking of applying for a role at company. Can I ask you a question about the team there? I think another version I've used is, hey, I'm thinking of applying at a role at company, and I would love to get an insider's opinion on something. But that'll be the connection request I send. And again, not everyone will accept it, but it's okay because you can send that same connection request to 6 people who work there, and at least one of them is going to accept. Once they accept, then you ask your question. So that's what I did here. It's kind of split between these 2 screenshots, but I asked my question. And again, this isn't any random question. This is one of the questions I came up with in my list of questions I would love to ask during an interview. I picked one, which is like the most compelling one, the most important one, and I dropped that into this DM. Then the individual contributor responds back, right? Her response here is, yeah, I think there could be a place for that style in our organization. I'd say you should apply and have the conversation. So I got the positive response. I got this individual contributor to say, yeah, I think that's actually a fit. That's how we operate. That's what we value. That might be a fit there. Then the last thing I did with these individual contributors is I asked, is there any benefit to you if you submit my application as like a referral on the back end rather than me submitting it myself online? And this is important to note because most companies have some sort of employee referral incentive program where if an employee refers someone who gets hired, that employee gets $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000, right? It's different, but there's very commonly a significant financial incentive for employees to recommend people to open roles. So really what you're doing here is they're doing you a favor by getting you in front of the hiring manager, but you're positioning it as you doing them a favor by getting them an opportunity to maybe make some money and get some benefits. So anytime I have an individual contributor tell me, yep, that sounds good, that's how we operate, I think you'd be a good fit here, I always ask, great, I'll apply then. By the way, since you've been so helpful, would it be beneficial to you if you submit it on the back end as a referral? And so usually they say, oh yeah, that actually would be helpful. Give me your resume, I'll do it for you. Other times in this case, they say, no, we don't do it that way, but they volunteer, hey, I'll still send a note to the enablement team anyways. And that's what happened with this one. I submitted that application, and then like the next day I heard back from the team, which is much faster than I'm used to hearing back from folks because Hannah sent this note to them. So this is just another avenue that you can use one of these questions to get yourself more interviews up front, and even to make sure the interviews start off right on the right topic, right? Since this is the question that got Hannah to introduce me at all, it's a very good chance the interview, when I have it, will start probably with this topic here, since that's what brought us together. So it's a good way to control the conversation, but it's also a way to get more at-bats. So that's it. That's all I had prepared for today. So again, the big takeaway here is there is no benefit to being everybody's second choice. What you want to do is clearly show up as yourself, everything that you are, what's great about you, heck, even what's not so great about you. And what you'll find is that when you clearly communicate exactly what you're a fit for, what you're not a fit for, how you operate, companies can clearly see if you're a fit or not. Some companies will clearly see that you're not a fit, in which case, no worries, it wasn't the right opportunity. And some companies will clearly see you are a fit. And that's really what companies need, is they need clarity, because it's so hard when you have 100 resumes, every resume looks alike. As an interviewer that everyone puts on a good face for interviews. It's so hard for interviewers to really get clarity as to whether or not someone will be a good fit. And if you're the one candidate they talk to that week where it's crystal clear what you're about and if you're a fit or not, you will get advanced more than the other 19 candidates they talked to where it was a little bit unsure if there's a fit or not. Of course, the thing to be aware of with this approach, though, is, again, there will be some companies when you show up clearly, strongly as exactly what you are, who will actually say, yeah, no, thanks. You're not the right fit. But again, that's okay, because you don't get paid based on the average of what 10 companies think about you, right? You get paid when one company picks you as the right person. So if you get one company to love you and 19 companies to hate you, that's better than 20 companies just feeling meh, lukewarm about you. And what we just went through, hopefully, is going to help you do that, right? Get clear on what matters most, what makes for a good fit. That's the first thing. Once you know what makes for a good fit, the second block is how you communicate that in an interview so the interviewer can clearly tell that there's a fit or not. And then the third step is once you know that, these are the techniques you can use. I did write these down just in text form in the worksheet so you have them. But these are the techniques you can use to use those questions to land you interviews. So we are at time. I will stop there. Of course, if anyone here has a question, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, thanks for attending, and I hope you find this valuable. Again, I'm job searching right now with this approach, and it's working quite well for me. So hopefully it helps some of you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan, for this great session. I actually haven't heard about the methodology you were explaining before, so it was very interesting for me. I'm gonna try to use it from now on. It needs some time in order to analyze what someone's want, but yeah, it is very interesting for sure. So I want to stop here and ask if anyone has a question first. If anyone's, so you can just unmute yourself or raise your hand or write the question in the chat. Otherwise, I have a question, but I want to make sure people, we're already on time. So if it's okay with 1 minute or 2 minutes only. Okay. Okay, so Jonathan, you're okay with asking one question, right?
Yep, we got time for one question.
Okay. I was just want to ask, it is very interesting and I understand what you were talking about finding your best skills, finding what do you want. But one thing I noticed is that with fresh career professionals, sometimes if I assume I'm not a fresh like I'm not a junior professional, but if I want to assume I'm one of them, and when I was one of them, I didn't know my skills enough because I didn't have enough work experience to know what makes me stand out of the others, out of the peers. Sometimes, like, there were some basic skills that I didn't even, like, I overlooked it. And then it turns out it is one of them in my strength points. So, what do you recommend in order to not underestimate yourself or to get over the imposter syndrome and to truly analyze like your skills and identify what makes you stand out between between the crowds?
Yeah. No, it's a good question. So definitely, you can do a lot of thinking on your own about this stuff and, write down a whole bunch of different ideas and thoughts. What you'll probably find, like most things when you're writing out lists, at first it's a little tough to think of them, but once you get in the groove, right, maybe you'll be able to come up with a dozen different things. Definitely don't limit yourself to work experience though, right? You are the same person in every area of your life. So certainly think about school projects and how you tend to think about things and how you approach things. Think about challenges in your own personal life and how you tend to approach them. Think about relationships you have with people and what role you play in a lot of relationships for people. So definitely, your own thinking is one of it. I would encourage you to talk to people who know you too, friends and family, right? Run these by them and try to figure out from them what's different about me. Because a lot of times for you, it's tough to see, right? You just assume everybody's this way. But people who know you might be able to say, you know what, Mohammed, you're actually really good at diffusing tense situations or at thinking outside the box or at staying resilient and keeping your attitude up even when things go poorly, right? Other people might know these things about you better than you know it about yourself. So that's the second category. The other thing you could look into is they do have like different types of online assessments. I took one early in my career called the Clifton Strengths Finder. You could look that up, but there's other sort of like personality assessments and strengths assessments out there. Some of them are free that you could take, and you could use that as inspiration as well. Yeah, don't limit yourself to just working experiences. Think about every situation in your life and how you've shown up. And again, treat this list of 3 top criteria as very much a work in progress. every time you go through interviews, you might be making adjustments based on, again, what you realize matters to you or what you realize matters to companies. Because ideally, you want to pick three things that both matter a lot to you and matter a lot to the companies you're talking to. Those are the things you want to focus on. So feel free to make some adjustments. I do have to hop now, though. So thanks for the time, folks. And I definitely
Thank you.
enjoyed presenting this, and hopefully you guys find it valuable as well.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. Take care
Perfect.
and
Bye-bye.
yeah, stay. Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, Muhammad.
اوكي.
Thank you. شكرا لكم جميعا للانضمام وإنكم ضليتكم حتى لهذا الوقت بالسيشن، فأكيد بنتشكر لكم جميعا وبنشوفكم إن شاء الله بلقاءات جاية.
شكرا لكم كتير، وممكن تعبوا الفيدباك سيرفي، انا حطيت اللينك في الشات، وبرضو بتقدروا تسجلوا للكوهورت القادم، التسجيل مفتوح، برضو اللينك موجود في الشات. وشكرا لوقتكم.